What up? So, as the title says, I'm turning 30. Or I've already turned 30. I don't know when I'm going to post this. And also, as the title says, I'm pretty not happy about it. And I'm not upset for the typical reasons that people get mad at the inescapable process of getting older, which I think are completely valid and reasonable, by the way. Like, I know we place a lot of value, some might say a little too much value, in our youth, beauty, spontaneity, excitability, athleticism, etc. And it's undeniable that those things start to deteriorate as we get older. And so justifiably, people tend to dislike the entire notion of aging because we begin to lose those things, which up until this point, we've gotten pretty used to having. And that is not an enticing prospect. And so, of course, I'm also not really looking forward to losing some of those things. If you saw my minor victory video, then you know I am already losing my athleticism, and clearly I am bothered by it, as evidenced by the fact that, I made a whole video about it. But despite the daunting reality of losing aspects of yourself that have largely defined who you are as a person for the majority of your life, it's not really the reason I'm upset right now about turning 30. The reason I'm upset right now about turning 30 is because I'm only just now starting to realize how much time I wasted in my 20s. Let me explain. So I feel like birthdays are always the perfect time to reflect on the past year of your life. When you turn 26, you reflect on what it was like to be 25, and so on and so forth. But now that I'm getting close to 30, I feel compelled to not only reflect on what it was like to be 29, but also to reflect on what it was like to be in my 20s in general. And my 20s were straight up bad. This decade was a catastrophe for me. Okay, I was down bad, down cataclysmic for the majority of this time. And sure, there were extended periods of time when things were good. It wasn't all doom and gloom. But if I had to group these 10 years together and analyze them as a whole, by absolutely no metric could I conclude that this was a good 10 years for me. No, my 20s can be summed up as a time where I destroyed literally everything I'd built up for the previous 2 decades. My relationships, my personality, my aspirations, everything destroyed. And that's something I really need to emphasize. I destroyed them. Not other people, not any ailments or sicknesses, not any crazy, unpredictable circumstances. No, it was me. I ruined my life. I mean, did life throw me some crazy twists and turns along the way? Absolutely, but I don't think there's a single person on this planet who hasn't had life throw them a serious curveball here or there. And the reason I'm the culprit is because I kept making the same mistake over and over throughout my 20s that essentially prevented me from making any progress in terms of my own growth and development. I basically got caught in this extreme cycle of trial and capitulation. I would give my best effort for a short period of time until I would hit a wall and get overwhelmed by my circumstances, at which point I would capitulate on everything and basically quit trying until I found some reason or inspiration to try again. And during the capitulation, I would stop working out, stop eating right, stop responding to the friends that stuck with me even after I dropped out of college and ghosted on them. I would turn to drugs, alcohol, and other forms of escapism. I would allow myself to succumb to my unhealthy addictions, etc. And during the trial period, I would essentially do the complete opposite and try to overcome these addictions. Eat right, exercise, reach out to my friends, avoid drugs and alcohol, etc. And basically, I just existed on extreme opposite ends of this spectrum throughout my 20s. I was either relentlessly optimistic about the future or hopelessly withdrawn from my present reality. And this dichotomy of selves got so bad that one of my friends actually suggested that I get tested for bipolar disorder. And I can't really blame him at all for suggesting that. I mean, from an outside perspective, my trial periods of relentless optimism could easily be described as drawn-out manic episodes, especially when they were continuously followed by extended periods of depression, hopelessness, and despondency. And if that cycle continues for an extended period of time, for like a decade, then it makes sense to consider whether there's a medical explanation for this type of behavior. But speaking as the person who went through this experience, I can say that even as I was in the depths of this, it never really felt like I was physically or mentally incapable of figuring things out, which, if that were the case, would have suggested that some kind of medical intervention was necessary. But for me, it always felt like this was all happening because of a flaw in my character, because of a certain apathy or stubbornness, a refusal to accept reality for what it was and to change and adapt myself to that reality. And if I could just learn to do that, I could escape this cycle, but I kept making the same mistake. Each time life threw me that curveball that would eventually overwhelm me, I'd basically just throw my hands up and ask, well, what's the point? If life is gonna do this to me anyway, then why bother avoiding my addictions? Why bother avoiding drugs and alcohol? Why bother reaching out to friends when my shame makes it so hard to talk to them in the first place? Why bother exercising? Why bother eating right? Why bother trying? I might as well allow myself to feel good, even if it hurts me, since everything is gonna come crumbling down around me anyway. And then I'd enter the capitulation period where I'd give up on all those things that I knew were good for me. The problem, though, was that the more I'd quit and fall back into that hole, the deeper the hole became, and the harder it was to climb out of each time. And so the periods of depression, hopelessness, and despondency grew longer and longer, while the periods of relentless optimism shortened. And the thing is, I can only articulate all of this now as I look back on my 20s as a whole. But there's no way I could have articulated this while I was going through it. I couldn't disassociate from this, take a step back, and realize the cycle that I was caught in. It was everything I could do just to make it to the next day. Because trust me, there were times where I didn't think I would, and there were times where I didn't even want to. But thankfully, thanks to the otherworldly levels of support that I got from the people around me, friends, family, and even strangers alike, I am now allowed the opportunity to look back and to try to make sense of this time so that I can hopefully avoid repeating these mistakes in the future. But even as I look back, I can't help but feel a deep sense of anger and regret about this time, because it's left me in a situation that I am extremely dissatisfied with. As I've said in possibly every video I've ever made, I can't support myself without the help of other people, and I am deeply ashamed of that fact. And the time that I spent in my 20s failing to realize the mistakes I was making and repeating them over and over is directly responsible for these undesirable circumstances that I now find myself in. And so, as the title implies, I am pretty furious with myself because of this. Do I have empathy for myself? Of course. I remember just how difficult it was to go through these experiences. Like I just said, I didn't even always want to make it through them. But that doesn't mean that I can deny the truth, which is that I did have opportunities to realize my mistakes and to make the necessary adjustments, and that my inability/refusal to do so is exactly what led me to where I am now, in a situation that I am entirely unhappy with. But there is a silver lining, and I also mentioned this in a previous video, but a doctor can't fix a problem until they know it's there. And so being able to reflect on my 20s as a whole has given me the opportunity to identify one of the bigger mistakes that I've been making, one of my major illnesses, if you will. It goes with the whole doctor analogy better, so that I can start fixing it or operating on it, which will hopefully be what my 30s are for. Now, obviously, there are so many other quote-unquote illnesses for me to diagnose and rectify, but I really do think that this was a big one that was really holding me back. So I am very much looking forward to dealing with this so that I can get out of my current situation, which ultimately makes me pretty excited for my 30s in general and for my 40s after that, and so on and so forth. Sure, I may not be able to absolutely demolish an entire Domino's medium pepperoni and bacon pizza with a side of cinnamon twists in one sitting without feeling like absolute trash garbage for the next 7 days anymore. But if that means I can start to know myself well enough to avoid the depression, despondency, and despair hole that I kept falling into during my 20s, then getting older isn't really all that bad, at least for me. But with that, I think I'm going to end this one. If you made it this far, I truly can't thank you enough for watching. I'd really wanted to add a little comedy to this one, like I did with the last video, because those are always more fun to make, and I feel like they're also more fun to watch. Maybe. But I think I mentioned this before, and sometimes these scripts just come out as they come out, and I don't always have full control over them, if that makes any sense. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to explain it in the next video. But for now, let me just again say thank you so much for watching, and I hope life gives you an opportunity to reflect on things. It's not always fun, but I do think it's always worth it. But anyway, with that said, I wish you all the very best going forward. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Peace, and be easy.